This is a recording from Reunions Weekend 2010 at the University of Virginia, made possible by the Office of Engagement's Alumni Education Program. As our global population increases and resources decrease, how do we rethink our cities to be healthier, more sustainable, and efficient? Timothy Beatley from the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning at the School of Architecture and Paxton Marshall, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering, addressed some of these questions at a seminar on June 4th, 2010.
Historically, we probably haven't thought enough about the role of cities in addressing those problems. And that's essentially what we've been doing a lot of in the School of Architecture, especially in the planning program in the last few years. So we understand that cities, when you look at where carbon is emitted, greenhouse gases are emitted, where energy is consumed, where food is consumed, it's in cities. And we're becoming an increasingly urbanized planet. Well, cities also represent, in my opinion, the best hope we have for achieving truly sustainable results, truly sustainable futures. So very, very exciting things happening in cities, and cities around the world are rising to the fore and setting very, very ambitious environmental targets and green ambitions. So I like to start with this. Herbie Girardet is a British filmmaker, activist, who says the cities of the 21st century are where human destiny will be played out, where the future of the biosphere will be determined. There will be no sustainable world without sustainable cities. It's very, very true. The guy on the left actually is not Herbert Girardet. His name is Klaus Bondum, and he is the deputy mayor for the city of Copenhagen. And he is holding up an aspirational document for that city. We actually filmed him. If we get to showing this little clip, you'll see Klaus in action. Until recently, his portfolio has been environment and sustainability, and there's been an election, and he's shifted over to a different subject area. But he's my stand-in for all of the high-level administration going on around the world, mayors and deputy mayors, and local officials of various sorts who are aspiring to different futures and imagining their cities as different places. So this aspirational document he's holding up, they're now calling themselves, Copenhagen, calling themselves an eco-metropole. And they are setting some very, very ambitious targets for 2015 in this document. Minimum green spaces per capita, maximum greenhouse gas emissions per capita, targets for bicycle riding. Their 2012 or 2015 target is they hope to reach a point where 50% of the home-to-work trips in that city are made on bicycles. That's pretty amazing, pretty hard to imagine. It doesn't sound very realistic in the American context. And it would be a little funny if not for the fact that Copenhagen is already almost at 40% of home-to-work trips made on bicycles. So they're actually continuing to push forward and continuing to imagine even less carbon-intensive, energy-intensive city. And in fact, the most recent news from Copenhagen is that they have declared that they're going to be the first carbon-neutral capital city in the world. That's pretty ambitious, but it's a terrific model for the rest of us. So my stand-in, Copenhagen is leading the way, of course, but what's interesting about the time we're in, lots of other cities, it's not just the usual suspects. It's not just Portland, Oregon's. It's Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Chicago. We know, of course, Mayor Daley in Chicago has declared that city is going to be the greenest city in the U.S., sometimes the world, depending on the day. Mayor Bloomberg in New York, not to be outdone by Chicago, says that New York City is going to be the first ecologically sustainable city of the 21st century. I was in Houston the week before last. Been spending a lot of time in Houston. And Houston, many of you may know about the former mayor's just stepped down running for governor, Bill White, who has been reelected a number of times actually in Houston based on a green platform, and recently has been famous for saying that Houston is going to be the greenest city in the U.S. So if Houston is saying this, something is happening. Something good is going on. So these are both daunting and exciting times to be in planning and design and to be thinking about cities. I can't remember actually a more exciting time to be in city planning right now, where there's been There hasn't been a time where there's been more interest in planning or more hope for the possibilities of planning. So this larger agenda for cities is multifaceted. There are lots of things we're trying to do all at once. It's a daunting agenda in that sense. We're trying to create the conditions where we respond to, we create healthy places, we create places that allow people to walk and bicycle and break out of their kind of sedentary lifestyles, places where we want to profoundly reduce energy consumption, where we want to reduce the size of the ecological footprint. Cities, again, are the best place, hold the best hope for doing that. So we want to expand and increase the quality of life. At the same time, we reduce that environmental impact. That's probably my best shorthand definition for what sustainability is all about. So here are some little snapshots of the goals that we're trying to achieve. Resilience. Many of us are using the word resilience a lot more than we used to. When we think about climate change and think about heat waves and drought and natural disasters, all the things that cities are going to have to face in the future, resilience seems to resonate, seems to capture what we need to design into cities. Resilience, will we be resilient? Will cities be resilient in the face of long-term global decline in global oil supplies? Well, many American cities like Atlanta will not be terribly resilient. I've just come back actually from Dhaka, Bangladesh. There's a city that is not very car dependent actually, and will do just fine, thank you, in an era of long-term global oil decline. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So there are a lot of things we're trying to do at once. It is an exciting time because we're redefining the very nature of cities, which is neat. So new ways of thinking about cities. Just to build on a couple of these images, we do in fact need to move pretty quickly beyond fossil fuels. How do we do that? Well, reimagining cities as places that produce at least as much power as they need. This concept of solar cities and renewable energy cities. Cities that produce that power from renewable technologies integrated into the built environment. So not the usual approach, which is large coal-burning power plants or large facilities that transport energy long distances and lose a lot of that energy in the process, but integrating renewable energy production into built environments. That's a kind of a new idea. And I'll give you some examples, a couple of Australian cities that are aspiring to be solar cities, for example. Zero waste and circular metabolism. New way of thinking about cities. Cities really represent a complex flow of inputs and outputs. Inputs in the form of energy and water and materials and food, and those things come from somewhere. Often we don't care where they come from as long as they arrive. The other end, we produce a lot of things, a lot of outputs, a lot of waste, solid waste, and greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. Those things go away, we hope they go somewhere. But increasingly we recognize that a sustainable city is one that understands itself as this complex set of inputs and outputs as a metabolism, and we begin to aspire to a metabolism where the size of the throughputs is significantly reduced. The supply lines are shortened. Kim mentioned the food issue, that we want to, in fact, grow more food locally. That's a profound way of shortening the supply lines we have in cities. And we also want to find ways of connecting the outputs and the inputs so that something that was a waste is returned back to the city as a productive input. So that's pretty aspirational. And then some of the other ones I think probably speak for themselves. Well, there's one about food. It's really a different way of thinking about cities. Understanding that cities aren't just these sort of black holes that absorb food from far away distances from hundreds and thousands, in some cases thousands of miles away, but rather are bountiful. A new image of cities as bountiful places where we could actually grow a lot of the food, if not all the food we need. And we have actually quite a bit of space in American cities to do that. So, okay, so what a little bit more detail about what American cities and global cities might look like if they were more sustainable. One of the things we spend a lot of time talking about in urban planning is the form, the urban form that cities take. We want to argue, we do argue that we want to create compact, walkable urban forms, denser urban forms. If you get the form right, the land use right, then that lays the foundation for doing a lot of the other things that we want to do. You've probably never seen this graphic before, but it's become a bit famous in planning. It's actually the work of a colleague of mine, Peter Newman from Australia, and he charts, one of the few people who has a global cities database and looking at relationships, in this case, between urban density on one axis and per capita fuel consumption on the other. It's not rocket science, of course. In American cities, we spread out, we're sprawling, we're very car dependent, so our per capita energy consumption is very high. The other end, look at the Asian cities, and usually when I show this graphic to American audiences, they protest a little bit that they don't want to become Tokyo or Singapore or Hong Kong. And so for me, what it often means is that we need to find models, and the models are often European. And in this recent book about Australian cities, some Australian examples, very compact cities that actually can profoundly reduce our land footprint, but also our energy footprint as well. If you were to graph per capita greenhouse gas emissions against density, it looks very similar to that. So a lot of what I do is tell stories about cities that have been able to tighten their urban form, maintain a tight urban form, create more compact, walkable, mixed-use living environments, and there are lots of examples. I started with Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a terrific story, in particular of maintaining an urban population and reclaiming space in the center of that city back from the automobile, giving it back to pedestrians. They've even adopted as official city policy that 2 to 3% of the parking spaces in downtown Copenhagen each year have to be converted back to pedestrian space. So since the 1960s, this has been a very interesting strategy of kind of strategic gradualism. Had they tried to do it all at once, it would have been hard, but they've created a marvelous pedestrian network. People are outside and walking and eating outside. It's very interesting, by the way. One of the notions of one of the premises in biophilia is that we want to get people to spend more time outside and experiencing nature. They thought in Copenhagen that the Danes wouldn't want to be outside as much, that they wouldn't want to be strolling and eating outside. And there was a lot of naysaying. Jan Gale, who urban designer, had a lot to do with creating this network. Got a lot of skepticism about this, and of course the story now, the result is that yes, the Danes want to be outside, and it's the place to be and the place to see people and be seen and to eat outside, and it's been very interesting to watch over the years as the outdoor eating season has gradually extended and expanded in that city, so that now if you want to eat outside in November or December, you sit down at a restaurant, not only will you be given a menu, you're very likely to be given a blanket as well, just in case you get a little cold. So adaptation to spending more time outside. Well, there are lots of other examples, and some of them newer. One of the ones we talk about in this Green Urbanism Down Under book is the city of Melbourne. And Jan Gale calls it the Melbourne Miracle. It's a terrific story of how that city has moved from being a very, very car-dependent American-style city to reclaiming its downtown and actually more people living downtown, doing just about everything, as this quote suggests, right, to try to enhance the quality of the center city. More people, streets, squares, lanes, and parks, wider sidewalks, quality materials. They've covered all the downtown in this beautiful these bluestone pavers, created more spaces like Federation Square in the lower right-hand corner, reinvested in their historic tram system. did just about everything, and including extending the grid of the downtown so that all the major new developments, in fact, are connected and people can easily walk to the center of Melbourne. Impressive results here. Tenfold increase in downtown population since the 1980s. Number of cafe seats gone up 275% in 10 years. 40% increase in foot traffic. They've gone from having 2 outdoor cafes in 1973 to 356 in 2004. There was a time in Melbourne when eating outdoors was illegal. Believe it. Kind of crazy thought. So a terrific story. And a big part of the story, actually, is how you can make these outdoor spaces interesting. Places where you do, in fact, want to spend more time. And one of the things that we found in almost every Australian city is a very detailed, elaborate public arts plan. And giving importance to investing in public art is part of the story. And so in Melbourne, you walk around and see the evidence of this. It's sometimes whimsical, but it's fun. It makes walking in that city very, very interesting. Anyway, lots of interesting art in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect it. So the images on the left are part of Melbourne's Laneways art program. So this is an effort actually to support art installations that entice people to walk down alleys and laneways they would not otherwise visit. And the results actually have been pretty dramatic. Reclaiming of those spaces, new cafes, new shops, new things going on in those leftover and somewhat ignored spaces. By the way, the image on the upper right is actually the only one not from Melbourne, and that's from Brisbane. Brisbane has had for many years a very interesting public arts program. They encourage citizens to paint the traffic signal boxes in that city. And this is kind of a neighborhood-based, you come up with a design that connects with the neighborhood, the history of that place, and you propose it, and the city will give you the materials to do it and help you do it. And now there are 900 of these traffic signal boxes in Brisbane, and they're beautiful. And they add an element of color and design and fun to that city. So okay, thinking about a green and sustainable city as one with compact urban form, trying to get people out of their cars. When you have that dense, more compact development pattern, it makes possible things like transit. I'm a big advocate of public transit. Any city that will want to be resilient in the future has to invest in transit. We know from a sustainability point of view, it's essential compared, of course, to reliance on individual cars. This is BTU, energy efficiency, BTU per passenger miles, no comparison. And we will probably never completely do away with cars, but we need to give better balance to other forms of mobility. So investing in transit, this is actually a neighborhood that we filmed in Stockholm called Hammarby, a new, compact, dense neighborhood. One of the key lessons from European cities is that for transit to be successful and to keep people out of their cars, we have to make those investments ahead of time. We have to coordinate that investment with development and land use changes. So in this neighborhood, the fast tram was up and running even before people were moving into their flats. So they knew from the beginning that they had an alternative to driving their car. Plus there are car-sharing cars here and extensive investment in bicycling facilities and actually a pretty nice walk to the center of Stockholm as well. So that's important. I'm a big fan of bicycles. And I think we can make every city profoundly bicycle friendly. That's me, by the way. Way back in 2000 or so, I did a book called Green Urbanism, Learning from European Cities, and actually lived in the Netherlands for a year, writing this book and traveling around Europe. And it's a bit embarrassing to tell the story, but my wife and I, we were consolidating our households, typical American family. We actually had 3 cars between the 2 of us. We sold 2 of the cars, and we actually took a car with us to the Netherlands. It's bizarre to think this now, looking back. Well, that whole year, of course, I basically lived on a bicycle, and bicycle in combination with walking and transit. One of the problems we have, of course, in American cities, the sedentary lifestyle, we know rising obesity rates, we know the health impacts of this very indoor and car-dependent kind of lifestyle that we lead, but it's hard to figure out how to break out of that, right? Because Americans, we have this sort of exercise scheduling issue. We've got to exercise from 10:40 to 11:10, whatever it is. It's got to be on the schedule, and you probably are going to get in your car to drive to the place to do that. There's a great slide one of my colleagues has of people riding the escalator up to the health club. Heaven forbid that you get a little exercise on the way to getting exercise. So it's a kind of a recipe for failure. And when we moved to the Netherlands, I was a jogger, and I pretty quickly stopped jogging. Partly because they kept pointing at me, and jogging was kind of not something that the Dutch did in those days. But it was mainly because I didn't feel the need to jog. It was just part of my exercise, physical activity, being outside was just part of the normal stuff that I did in the course of the day. And we've got to figure out how we can incorporate that kind of automatic nature of physical activity into American cities, and at least make that possible. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand cities, good cities, cities that have invested in transit or in bicycles, have become a big fan of public bike programs. We try to film wherever we go. Now, a little footage from Barcelona. Some of you know about the Velib system, 20,000 bikes on the streets of Paris. Not a perfect story, but a pretty good story. In fact, better stories. This is, again, Barcelona. Barcelona's system, it's called Bicing. It's a little bit smaller, about 6,000 public bicycles. And it's a smart card system, so one of the reasons I'm showing you this film is to give you a little bit of a sense of the hub, how much activity there is around these bicycle stations. So you have a little smart card, you flash it in front of the screen, it recognizes your membership and gives you a number, flashes you a number, which is the number of the assigned bicycle. So you go and take that bike, use it, and then bring it back to any one of the stations around the city. And people in Barcelona have become a bit crazy about these bikes. And Barcelona is a walking city, but it's not been a bicycle city. So it's been remarkable to see the transformation here and the catalytic effect that this kind of infrastructure can have in that city. The upper right hand slide, do you see the little doggy up there? That's not part of the bicing program, but it's indicative of how much affection now residents of Barcelona have for bicycles. So this is an elderly guy riding his bike around with a little doggy and accompanying him. So we have lots of other examples, of course, good bicycle stories and bicycle-friendly cities. It's interesting, I've just come back from Dhaka, Bangladesh, where they have 15 million people in that city, and some of the people in the kind of upper leadership of the city, as you might expect, are aspiring to more American-style cities. And car dependence, we see this, of course, in lots of places around the world. The Chinese are questioning, bicycles, whether they're really a modern mode of transportation. Well, in Bangladesh, there is a struggle right now to try to protect these bicycle rickshaws. And there are actually 500,000 of these bicycle rickshaws. And it's a major form of mobility in the city. So it's a struggle. We'll see how it turns out. It's very interesting to watch who's on which side. And organizations like the World Bank are arguing that they need a more efficient system, that read cars and highways, and that they need to be devoting more of their urban space to roads. Exactly, what we're trying to shift away from in planning. So anyway, it's been very interesting to watch. It was interesting to watch this the last 2 weeks ago when I was there. The amazing things, the extent to which material gets moved around in that city on these bicycles, on the rickshaws, and by one estimate, providing 1 million jobs. The single largest employment sector in the city of Dhaka these bicycles. So why you'd ever want to do away with them is hard to understand. So, but the bicycle issues will be different, depending on the place and depending on the city. This is interesting. Tried to get a picture of one of these in action. I couldn't quite do it, but does anyone know what these are? You're probably, Bengali is probably not your language. You probably don't know what this says, but these are school bicycle buses lined up waiting for the school kids to get out. So they actually load up, and there's one person that drives the bicycle bus. I don't even know that they don't call them that. This is what I've made this up, but but that's essentially what they are. So it's remarkable again how much gets moved around, including school kids going to and from school. So that's a kind of a different way of thinking about infrastructure, which is one of the things that we're doing a lot of talking about and planning is what kinds of new infrastructure do we need, and this idea of having a more distributed infrastructural system that may be more resilient, we hope is more resilient to things like climate change and natural disasters. So I mentioned the need to shift beyond large fossil fuel burning power plants. This distributed energy system, the idea of having, again, solar and renewable energy integrated into built environments. Well, we have some emerging examples of that. This is one story, another place that we filmed in this movie. It's a place called the Western Harbor in Malmö, Sweden. And it's a redevelopment district, and they have set the goal of providing 100% of the power needed for that neighborhood from local, renewably based power. And they've actually reached that goal. Not with any one thing, but through a number of different renewable energy technologies, including the lower left image, which is a facade-mounted solar hot water heating system, a kind of vacuum technology that's feeding hot water into a district heating grid. Very, very interesting. They also have a very large wind turbine and some other aspects, other elements of that renewable energy plant. Many other cities, though, that are doing similar things. Back to Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the few cities to have adopted a minimum solar energy standard or ordinance. Actually, if you build a new apartment building in Barcelona, at least 65% of the hot water needed for that building has to be supplied by solar hot water heating. So there's been this amazing increase in the number of solar energy installations, including photovoltaics, by the way. We have new ideas for building structures, new ways of thinking about energy consumption, new aspirations. And many of us are arguing that we need to think in terms of buildings that produce more energy, perhaps, than they actually require. And these were a couple of images. The last slide, a very interesting green neighborhood in Freiburg, Germany called Vauban. And one of the things they have in Vauban are these so-called plus energy houses. These are houses that are designed to require a tiny little bit of energy and then producing more energy actually than the building needs over the course of the year. So they're called plus energy homes. There's a German architect who's become kind of famous for these houses and actually lives in a rotating solar house, which is kind of an interesting place to live. So cities imagining themselves as solar cities. Can you imagine a city that is producing, all or most of the energy it needs from solar and renewable energy, more broadly defined? These are images from Adelaide in South Australia, and Adelaide, one of the first cities to participate in the Commonwealth government's Solar Cities program, and they are imagining themselves as a solar city. And for them, that means a number of things, including doing things like designating part of the downtown as a solar precinct and using it as an opportunity to demonstrate and test new energy ideas. The bottom image actually is very interesting. These are street lamps. They have, of course, a lot of eucalyptus trees in Australia, and there's a kind of eucalyptus called a mallee, and it's a kind of a scrubby tree, and these are intended to look like mallee trees. It's a kind of public art, but they have photovoltaics on the top, and they produce about 7 times the power needed to power the street lamp. So it's sending energy into the power grid, and that's a pretty interesting way of thinking about urban design elements. So, could we rethink the building facade, the rooftop, the sidewalk, every little feature in a city could be an opportunity to produce power, and that's pretty neat and a pretty different way of thinking about, again, a kind of distributed energy system. So we have lots of new ideas, and one of them we've been talking about, something that the city of Sydney in Australia has been pioneering, this idea of green transformers, they call them. And what we realize now is that the infrastructure of the future in cities will not just be single-purpose infrastructure. It has to be doing multiple things, and that's essentially the idea here. These are points along the city. You see a little map on the upper left, those little circles. They're intended to be power generating stations, decentralized power generating stations, combined heat and power, so it's producing electricity but also heat and cooling, powered by waste products generated in the neighborhood. So there is a kind of waste collection and waste treatment component to this as well. They're also intended to collect stormwater, and retain and treat stormwater, allowing it to percolate back into the ground. It's also new parkland, new spaces for new public spaces and new public pedestrian areas as well. You see a little bit of crosshatch that tells you some of the different functions that will take place in a green transformer. So there are lots of really interesting new ideas for how we can produce power in cities and in neighborhoods in cities. This is one that we discovered in Australia, an inventor who's invented something called wind pods. These are airfoils that actually collect the wind and they produce more power. They actually make the turbine go faster than a normal turbine. So anyway, lots of new ways of thinking about infrastructure. This is a project, another Sydney project that new ways of thinking about water infrastructure is part of what we need to be thinking about too. Not only are we worried about peak oil, we're worried about peak water, and many, many parts of the world that are reaching limits in potable water. Australia being one of them. And in this project, all the water that falls on the site is virtually all of it is recycled and reused. And that's a kind of a different way of thinking about water infrastructure. I mentioned this idea of metabolism and beginning to think about cities as a form of circular metabolism or closed loop metabolism. This is back to Hammarby in Stockholm, one of the few neighborhoods in the world that has been designed from the beginning with an understanding of the inputs needed and the outputs that will be generated, and looking from the start at opportunities to connect the inputs and outputs. So the lower left-hand image is a natural gas stove. There are about 1,000 units that have these natural gas stoves that burn natural gas collected from organic household waste from the neighborhood. So it's something that was a problem. A waste product it becomes something useful for the neighborhood. So beginning to understand cities as sustainable circular metabolisms, if you will. Another part of this agenda has to do with learning from nature and imagining cities in the future that are more like natural systems. This concept of biomimicry that Janine Vinyas and others have been writing about in the last decade or so. This idea that we have, millions of years of research and development there in nature that we ought to take advantage of and we ought to use in some way. And I don't know if any of you have heard about Masdar City in Abu Dhabi. It's this ring a bell at all? Actually, an odd juxtaposing for me on the way back from Bangladesh. I actually spent a day in Dubai and went up to Abu Dhabi. This is the United Arab Emirates. And this is, of course, a pretty important oil producing part of the world, you might say, kind of in the belly of the beast. And a very, very opulent, of course, very wealthy place. In fact, when you look at the ecological footprints of different nations around the world, the United Arab Emirates is number one. They don't have a large population, but it's a very consumptive population on a per capita basis. Would you imagine who number two would be? Yes? The U.S. Thank goodness for the United Arab Emirates. So we would be number one. Our footprint is like this compared to the rest. But this is a very interesting project. It's gotten a lot of support from the government there. They are trying to show the way and to show what very, very low energy, low footprint sort of cities might look like in the future. And so Masdar City has become, it's a prototype. It's under construction now. There's not very much of it that actually exists at this point in time. But there are a lot of plans and a lot of renderings, and that's essentially what is here. But there's an architectural firm called Lava, and they have done the design for Masdar Square, which is what you see here, which is the center of this new city. This new city, by the way, is planning to be carbon neutral, planning to produce all the power it needs from renewable energy, grow all the food that it needs. There will be a kind of personal rapid transit system incorporated. We'll see if it all happens the way it's planned. But this is sort of interesting. So this is a very hot, desert climate, of course, and so for this particular design, they're imagining that you'd have these parasols that would actually be producing power for the city when they're extended, but they would also provide shade. So what you would need in a desert environment, you see all the photovoltaics around the center too, which would be producing the power. So the idea is that you'd have these retractable parasols, and that in the evening they would be open, so that the square would be open, the parasols would be retracted, and pretty interesting. That's what nature does. That's what flowers and leaves of certain trees, and I always like to. I've had to show this several times, right? Because it's so cool. The extended during the day, and then what it would look like at night. There are probably 1,001 ways that cities could be modeled after nature, right? And we can mimic and be inspired by natural systems. This is just one example. And in fact, the whole concept of metabolism is modeling after nature. The idea of energy plus houses is really kind of a natural modeling after nature. The idea that we design like in nature. We design buildings and cities that are living off solar income and not extracting that non-renewable oil and gas. So biomimicry is an interesting sort of idea. But we have lots of other examples of buildings and urban neighborhoods that are biophilic in some way. I'm actually going to flip ahead and go right to this discussion of biophilia. I don't know how I thought I was ever going to cover all these slides. Another day, maybe. And I didn't even give you time to absorb them, did I? Oh well. I can go back and look at them later, but we are running out of time. So I've been using this word biophilic, biophilia. It's essentially, you've got the quick definition on the board, but Ed Wilson, E.O. Wilson has popularized this idea, has written several books about biophilia, one called Biophilia, another called the biophilia hypothesis. Essentially, the idea that we are, as a species, hardwired to need contact with nature in the natural world. This is not something that is optional. It's rather something that we co-evolved to need and to be fully happy, productive, human beings. We need to have that contact, and it's not something that we get once a month or once a year. It's something that needs to be all around us and needs to be integrated into our daily lives. So here it's just a slightly fancier way of saying it, the innately emotional affiliation of human beings to other living organisms. Innate means hereditary, and it's part of ultimate human nature. So we're hardwired to need this. So we know there are all kinds of studies that demonstrate this to us. And we know, for instance, that test scores for kids go up in schools that have lots of natural daylight, full spectrum natural daylight, for example. This is a study from the UK that shows the positive mood effects associated with walking in nature, having a walk outside as opposed to, in this case, walking in a shopping mall. So in this particular study, the walk outside, walk in nature, dramatic reductions in depression, anger, tension, confusion, fatigue, and an increase in vigor. Any number of other studies that we could talk about, and some of the more recent studies are quite interesting because they suggest that nature not only helps us to be more productive and happier, but it actually may help us to be better human beings, which is an interesting idea. That's essentially the finding of this study, and I won't go into the detail, but some researchers that showed that in simulated in experiments, people in more natural settings and office settings where there were more plants and nature tended to show more generous behavior. Maybe not hard to believe. Exactly what's going on is not clear, but it does seem that when we're around nature, we seem to be happier, healthier, more kind of at home and more open to this sort of full human values like generosity. So those more immersed in natural settings were more generous, whereas those immersed in non-natural settings were less likely to give. There's a kind of an experiment about how much you'd be willing to give, and other studies have come to similar sorts of conclusions, and so it makes you think, well, we really need that green space, those green elements to activate that the kind of full humanness of ourselves. It's an interesting idea. The little image on the right is actually another Australian example. It's a sulfur-crested cockatoo. And when we lived in Australia, almost the first day we moved into our apartment, there was a group of cockatoos arrived at the balcony to investigate and to find out how generous we were. And I'm not sure how generous we were to them, but part of the challenge in thinking about a biophilic city is how you can integrate into that everyday experience contact with animals and, of course, plants and nature more generally, and often it's about paying attention to the things around you because there is an awful lot of nature already in cities. So the other part of this for me has been a concern about how denatured our current lives are, or how we don't have so much contact in our daily lives, and particularly kids. This sort of idea of denatured childhoods. The kids today are more than certainly was the case when I was growing up, tend to be more indoor oriented, right? More emphasis on computers and televisions and texting and all the stuff, media. And we thought actually that the hours per day of media that kids were getting was going to sort of plateau. Recent Kaiser Family Foundation study that shows actually that it continues to go up, and that actually we were now seeing a lot of this sort of double media, from kids are listening to something while they're playing something. You know, that it's a sort of double dose of media. Well, this doesn't bode well, it seems to me, for caring about nature, caring about the environment, and doesn't bode well for stewarding over the environment in the future. So has anybody read this book? By the way, this is has become a very popular book. It's a trade book. And Rich Louv has become a friend. He's in this movie, which hopefully I'm going to stop in about 5 minutes, and we'll still have time to show you this film clip. But Rich has coined this term, nature deficit disorder, as a way of describing this kind of denatured childhood that kids are growing up in today. And it's pretty accurate, I think. And he does this somewhat alarming, funny sometimes thing of going around and interviewing kids, young kids, and asking them questions and recording their answers. And so he collects quotes like this one: "I like to play indoors better because that's where all the electrical outlets are." It would be sad if it weren't, so true and so guiding of our current way of living, and it's very much connected to the way we're designing neighborhoods and cities, right? And that's a lot of the argument, is that we should be designing places that allow for kids to explore, to safely explore, places where they have nature nearby, where they have sidewalks and pathways and trails and neighborhoods that are connected, and we create the conditions where they can, in fact, walk from one place to another, back to that compact urban form. And what a lot of us are calling the agenda of designing for free-range kids. Have you heard those terms, free-range kids? I mean, now there's several books with that title. But I grew up as a free-range kid. I lived in a neighborhood where it was, your parents called you back for dinner. That was, it was the dinner, the old-fashioned dinner bell, or the yell, things that kids don't know that as much anymore today. Well, my Australian colleague Peter Newman says that designing for free-range kids is too low a bar, that we should be more aspirational. We should be designing for feral kids. Feral kids. So I have a couple of feral kids. All for that. So what does that mean, and what did we, could be part of the design agenda? Lots of things and a lot of ideas in this film. I'll show you just a couple more slides. This is actually another bit of evidence about how disconnected we have become from nature. The last 5 or 6 years, I've been doing a survey, a visual survey, giving a visual survey to my incoming students, asking them if they can identify species of flora and fauna, mostly local species, and I have a kind of response sheet, and I'm actually asking them to write down what they see and what they can identify. And so this is just one example. The critter is a silver-spotted skipper. It's a very common species of butterfly. And this past year, I think I've given this several hundred students now. This past year was the first time I had a correct answer, that one of my students could correctly identify what species it was. There's no difficulty, of course, in identifying all the corporate logos that we have. But it's telling that kids can identify those golden arches at a mile away, traveling in a 75-mile-an-hour car, but are not likely to recognize something actually more profoundly part of their community or their home, and probably more nearby than that. So it's interesting with the silver-spotted skipper. It's very telling, I think, about what we don't know. I've had a lot of students tell me it was a moth, which is probably understandable. It looks like a moth. I've had a lot of students tell me it was a monarch butterfly. It doesn't look anything like a monarch butterfly. Apparently the only butterfly Americans know is a monarch butterfly. It's one butterfly. I've had 2 students tell me it was a hummingbird, which I thought was interesting. And this past year, someone told me it was a hummingbird moth, which I probably a new species created in the process of So it's not an insignificant issue, and I won't read this quote, but Paul Grishow talks about how names are passwords to our hearts, and it's not insignificant that we can't. Not only do we not seem to know the name, we often don't even recognize the species. So we've become profoundly disconnected on lots of levels. There are lots of ways that we could facilitate greater contact with nature, lots of biophilic opportunities. Anyway, one of the things we've been doing is developing a sound map for the city of Charlottesville. We believe that sound is part of the biophilic experience. It's the therapeutic sounds of summer evening here in Charlottesville. You know, the tree frogs and katydids and all those nighttime sounds. Like with the visuals, most of the sounds that we hear around us we don't recognize. There's very important biophilic sounds. This was a sound that, since I don't have it, I could probably simulate it for you. It's sort of a very interesting kind of a downward whinny sound that goes like that. And you would probably not recognize it, but it's an owl, an eastern screech owl, which is a very, very common species of owl, and a sound that we hear a lot. Many of us hear it and don't recognize it, just as though we don't recognize that. We don't have that ocular recognition. We don't have the sound recognition. You don't recognize. I'm going to go ahead, actually. And so there it is. So it's sound. It's multisensory. It's creating the conditions in which kids can get outside and again move from place to place, and adults also. We have lots of terrific examples of cities. This is Helsinki in the background. Has a multi-scaled, integrated network of nature. And so you can walk out your front door and be in a neighborhood park which connects with a larger park, which connects with a larger network of green, so you can go from your door all the way to old growth forest at the edge of the city. So we need these integrated systems. We've been working with the city in the Basque Country in Spain, Vitoria-Gasteiz. They've just finished a very interesting green belt around their city, and they're now working on an outer green belt to connect with the inner green belt and finding creative ways to get people from their urban neighborhoods out to the nature around them, including these very creative placards, creative signage, which shows you if you've got a few minutes, then you can go here. If you've got longer time, you can go over here, and actually showing them routes and showing them ways to get to where they might like to go. So lots of stories. There's a free-range kid. And neighborhoods like Hammarby that have invested in natural connections. So the upper image actually is one of two pedestrian green bridges that actually allow residents to walk over these highways and connect to a large green network. So green streets and green bridges, and an image on the left, daylighting of streams, bringing back those streams that we've put underground in pipes, bringing them back to the surface, making them a part of the neighborhood, greening all the built elements in a city, including installing green rooftops, for instance. Used to be a radical idea. It's not so radical anymore. This is the Ballard branch of the Seattle Public Library, 14 species of native grasses that wave in the wind. And you can see them all over from a number of points around the neighborhood. The new Cesar Calais design in Minneapolis Public Library, almost entirely covered with a green roof, including native species of cacti. Cacti native to Minnesota. I hadn't realized that. One of the things you'll see in the film here in a second is the concept of green walls. And this is a spectacular green wall we filmed in Paris, designed by a French botanist by the name of Patrick Blanc. And they serve all of the same functions as a green wall. They create habitat, they retain stormwater, they cool the environment, cool the building, reduce energy consumption, sequester carbon, and they're just dramatic, visually dramatic, and a visual demonstration, visceral demonstration of our biophilic impulses. People can't seem to walk by this wall without touching it or hugging it or interacting with it in some way or another. Okay, so here I'm going to just flip to the end. Here comes the slide presentation. This is another Patrick Blanc at the CaixaForum Museum in Madrid. One of the stories told in this upcoming book is an effort to green the Mission District in San Francisco. And this is Jane Martin, who's founded a new nonprofit called Plant SF. And they've created a new kind of regulatory permit to allow the neighborhoods to actually break up sidewalk and install and insert plants like this. Lots of other stories. This is San Diego. These are two urban trackers who are tracking a female bobcat in the middle of the city of San Diego. Lots of very innovative nature and biophilic education programs. In the city of Stockholm, they have a program for certifying nature guides, and this is one of them on the left. And the final couple of slides have to do with animals in the city. And my friend, who is now the new dean at the School of Architecture at UC Berkeley, Jennifer Walsh, has coined this term zoopolis. And she doesn't mean that she wants cities to be zoos, but what she means is that we should, in fact, reimagine cities as places that could accommodate and largely do accommodate animals, nature more broadly, but especially animals. And we have some terrific stories now of cities like Vancouver that have been able to formulate plans, coexistence plans, helping them coexist with coyotes in particular, but other wildlife as well. This is a terrific Walsh quote at the bottom. Zoopolis, to allow the emergence of an ethic, practice, and politics of caring for animals and nature. We need to renaturalize cities and invite animals back in, and in the process, re-enchant the city. This idea of re-enchanting cities by fostering, new contact, new opportunities for animals and plants and nature to be.
I feel like you didn't talk about cars very much. In the United States, and cars, and how I live in New York City. I work for New York City, and it's the most pedestrian. We have the fewest cars ever, and still people are very car-centric. And so many of these examples are in Europe and abroad, and how that shift doesn't seem to be happening here. To move away from cars.
Yeah. I think one of the answers is the story for DACA, which is let's figure out how to prevent cities from becoming more dependent on cars. Cities that aren't very dependent now, thinking globally, most American cities, of course, are already very, very car dependent. If anything, it's getting worse. It's a good question. It's a complicated answer. I think it's changing everything, changing the pricing structure. The example from Vauban and Freiburg, they're actually charging people, you can have a car. You have to declare, if they'd rather you didn't have a car. If you have a car, then you're immediately presented a bill for $20,000 to cover the cost of the parking space that you need.
Do you work in politics and change? And that, to me, that's so politically challenging.
How would you do that?
So,
and from New York, you've just gone through major congestion pricing, got killed, but more state level than the city. A lot of support, of course, Bloomberg and others, and just the pedestrianizing that has happened in that city, I have to say, very, 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 very positive. But there's no city as sustainable from a transportation point of view as New York, at least among American cities. So.
But it's not very bad, I feel like. So those things are kind of...
Yeah, that's an interesting question because...
I feel like there's much more green in New York City than there is in Charlottesville.
There's a lot of green there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Part of it's getting us outside, of course, and experiencing weather and climate and this fellow David Owen, who's written this book, Green Metropolis, who basically makes the argument that Manhattan is the model, should be the model, and he makes a good point that like the example of people riding the escalator up to the, if we don't create the conditions in which it's automatic to be walking, or more automatic, then people won't walk, and they'll be stuck inside and that mercy of cars. And so at least New York may not be as green as we'd like it to be, but at least it is getting people walking and outside, and by some indications, the healthiest city in the U.S. And so, but there needs to be more progress everywhere. But tackling the car, your basic question about how do we get beyond the car, I'm not sure, and it's a little discouraging right now. There's so much emphasis on green cars and electric cars, and the sense that that's the way we go, that's the solution. It's just simply to, we have a Prius, but, okay, we're getting 50 miles on the highway, that's great, we're still driving. And we can't break out from this car dependence by just simply changing the technology a little bit. But that seems to be what the prevailing wisdom is. And that's too bad. It's a great question. I don't have a very good answer. It's changing the attitudes, changing incentive structures. It's education. It's putting all those other modes of mobility on a more even par with cars. We teach driver's ed in high school. Well, maybe we ought to be teaching something else, teaching safe pedestrianism, bicycling, as we're doing now at some schools, and making it harder to get a driver's license. Things that would be really politically charged, right? If you start telling kids they have to wait until 21, which would be a good thing for a lot of reasons. That young brain is still developing. It's probably too early to be driving a car, in my opinion.
Establish a correlation between better health in the cities where the folks are actually getting outside or encouraging people to get outside.
There is a good correlation. We know that wherever people are getting more exercise, they tend to be healthier. And there are these studies, CDC and others have shown that people are healthier in New York. And there's also lots of other reasons, maybe concerned about diet and smoking campaigns and a lot of things. New York has been on the cutting edge of health for a lot of reasons and for a long time. But yes, the answer is, I don't think there's any doubt that cities that have more outdoor-oriented, more physically active citizens, they're healthier places. And the nature part of it is a little bit more, a little bit less documented, but the evidence is building up. I just showed you a little bit of it that we know from the green elements and green buildings and green schools and some of the experimental studies that are pretty convincing. And it makes a lot of sense that we've only been in cities and living in hermetically sealed places inside buildings for a tiny little bit of our evolutionary history. So it's maybe not surprising that we need that contact with nature. So I think we need to stop because the next session is coming up. Okay.